Tappei has just released Arc 7 Chapter 16. This video will be a summary of the chapter, and I highly recommend you check my summary for Arc 7 Chapter 15 first. We see Subaru and the gang have made it to the city of Guaral. Subaru thinks about his time spent at the Shadrakian camp and the Valakian encampment, which was like camping out in the open, so Subaru was really moved at seeing a proper city. However, something stops him though: gatekeepers who are monitoring who enters the city, essentially a checkpoint. We see that before Holly and Kuna left, they told Subaru to not be anxious or make a fool of himself, and as long as he wasn't carrying anything dangerous, he should be fine. Subaru thinks about it. Subaru is from Lagunica, and of course if he reveals his identity, he's sure that he'll get kicked out. And on top of that, he may even get captured, and then of course it's game over. Subaru thinks about not making mistakes, and Rem tells him to stop looking so grim, which is weird since Rem and Subaru are back to back, yet Rem knew that Subaru was making a grim facial expression. Subaru was confused, but Rem explained that their backs are touching, and as a result of that, she can hear his breathing and heartbeats. Rem tells Subaru to essentially calm down, but it wasn't with any hostility or malice that she said that. Lewis interrupted them, seeming to be bothered that Subaru wasn't lining up. Essentially, Subaru needed a plan, and they had no identity or money, so they really needed to be cautious and think about what they needed to do. Rem asks if they can speak to the guards, but of course Subaru wants to be cautious. What's also interesting is that it's confirmed that 10 days have passed since Subaru has arrived in Valakia. Subaru thinks to himself, this is the first time that they were sent here, that they've actually been alone. So what he actually means by this is before they had people like Todd and Jamal, or Abel, or the Shadrakian people, to essentially lead them when it came to Valakian customs or ideas, but now they were alone with no Valakian guide, essentially, so they had to be cautious. Subaru and Rem continue to talk, and Rem tells Subaru to hurry up. It seems that Subaru has a plan, as he smiles and does a thumbs up. The scene then changes. We see that Subaru, Rem and Lewis pass through the checkpoint, and Lewis was actually helpful in this for them being able to pass through the checkpoint. Subaru looks at the cityscape and compares it to the other cities he's been to, like Priscilla and of course the capital of Lagunica. All of these cities are unique in their own way. Rem wanted to be let down from the backpack, and Subaru obliged. As Rem turned around to look at the city, her eyes widened. She was excited to see the city and all of the people. The city most likely has a population of a few thousand people, and it isn't entirely active. Subaru asks if they want to look around, but Rem actually declines, stating that she doesn't want to take up time. Subaru and the group get approached by a carriage. We see that the man in the carriage helped Subaru and the group get into the city, a man with blonde hair called Flop. We also see that Flop has a sister called Medium, who has swords on her waist. And I believe their surname is O'Donnell, so essentially Flop O'Donnell and Medium O'Donnell. So yeah, wait for a proper translation on their names, but that will be the names I'll be using in this video. We see that Subaru met them in the queue and realized that without any money or way to prove his identity, he would need to take the initiative. Flop is a merchant, and Medium protects her brother. Subaru uses his experience from Otto and Anastasia to find suitable merchants, and after 4 groups, he found Flop and Medium. Flop was interested in the device that Subaru had built to carry Rem. In other words, he would help Subaru in exchange for the device. Subaru thought Flop would be more interested in the horn of the Elgina, but apparently not. Either way, Subaru could potentially rebuild the Rem backpack with the city materials that they obtain to make it even better. Rem does say that one problem with the backpack is that Subaru's stink wafts in the wind and she can smell it. Rem and Subaru banter, and Flop and Medium laugh. We see that Flop and Medium believe that Rem and Subaru are a married couple, as it makes their visitation more believable, which of course makes Rem angry at the idea. Also, Subaru is looking after Ram's child. So of course, Lewis is apparently Ram's child and Rem's niece, and Subaru and Rem are married. That's what they're going with. We find out with a flashback that it was Rem's quick thinking to state that they were married, which essentially allowed them in. If it wasn't for her quick intervention, they most likely would have been kicked out. Subaru of course is confused about why Rem went with the marriage angle, and Rem of course is angry that Subaru didn't come up with a better idea, because Subaru wanted to say that they were brother and sister, but of course they look nothing alike. So Rem went with that marriage angle. We see Subaru on a bunk bed and he's in, so he's found accommodation. He wasn't with Rem and Lewis, who were sharing a room next door due to the fact that different genders are separated into different rooms. Subaru of course didn't like that, mainly due to the fact that Lewis may be a problem. We see that Flop is also sharing a room with Subaru, and that Medium is also with Rem and Lewis. Flop is brushing his long hair, and Subaru apologizes. Flop states that their wisdom is what saved them, and whilst Wallachia has a creed that states that the strong survives, having wisdom is strength. We also see that Flop helped Subaru sell the horn in a heated battle with a shopkeeper, procuring Subaru and his team with money. Flop tells Subaru to relax after carrying his wife all day. Subaru goes to Rem's room to see if she's okay. Rem states that she doesn't know if Lewis should sleep in Rem's bed or Medium's bed, and Subaru is of course, not happy with it. Rem states that Subaru looks like he wants to say that Lewis should sleep on the floor. Rem of course realizes Subaru didn't say that because Rem would have gotten angry. Subaru thinks that even Medium's bed would not be a good idea, mainly due to Lewis being a danger. He would rather keep an eye on Lewis, but he was very tired. It's been 10 days, but you cannot trust a Sin Archbishop, and sooner or later she will show her true colours. Subaru states he's going out with Flop, and he says his goodbyes to Rem and the group. Flop taps Subaru and they start talking as they make their way to their destination. Subaru talks about relying on others and being a burden. Flop tells him that him and his sister rely on each other and cover for each other's weaknesses. So in other words, Flop is the merchant, he's the brains of the operation, and Medium is the warrior. So it's fine to do that because that's the Imperial way. Flop continues, stating that you need to find your balance. Life isn't only about fighting, and when you combine your abilities with other people, it hides your weaknesses and you become something more special. He states that the reason why they all met today is because they've all lived and survived all the encounters they've faced until now. Subaru thinks about how it would be possible to travel far. They would need something like a ground dragon. There's a species of animal called pharaohs, and Flop states that he can potentially help, but for Subaru's heavy baggage and long distance travelling, a pharaoh isn't the optimum choice. Flop states that there's a fire burning in the capital all year round. I believe this is a metaphorical statement. And of course Subaru thinks about this and wonders about Vincent Wallachia. Flop states that Vincent is a great emperor at pacifying the country, and that the smouldering fires will be reborn when Vincent makes his move, and that Vincent has been sending out statements. But of course Subaru thinks about this, knowing that Vincent has of course been ousted, so whoever's sending the messages is of course not Vincent himself. Subaru frowned upon hearing this, and Flop told him to smile and fix his eyebrows. However, Flop couldn't fix Subaru's eyes, of course. As they joke around, Flop and Subaru reach the hidden tavern, and Subaru thinks about potentially asking Flop and Medium to help them get back to Lagunica, and of course maybe Flop could then help people like Otto as well, but he doesn't know if he wants to ask because he will be a burden. Subaru then builds his resolve and he asks for a favour with Flop and Medium, and then Subaru blanked out. Subaru's consciousness is back. Flop of course is speaking to him about not frowning and to fix his eyebrows, but of course Flop can't fix Subaru's eyes. Subaru realised that this is a repeat conversation. His memory wasn't so bad to not remember this conversation and to not recognise these streets. Subaru had actually returned by death. His cheeks stiffened knowing that he used return by death, and he doesn't know what caused it. And the chapter ends. So of course, this was a very interesting chapter. Subaru has died. We don't know what killed him. I don't believe it's mana poisoning, but the fact that it's been 10 days, we do know that the mana poisoning is going to be a ticking time bomb. It did say something like Subaru felt something hard, or something hard rang out. So someone is of course there to attack and kill Subaru. But of course, who could it be? Because of course it's not going to be the Shudrak people. It could potentially be Todd or Jamal if they survived against the Elgina. But I'm not sure. Let me know what you think. And also this family aspect between Subaru and Rem and Lewis is funny. So people are memeing that Subaru and Rem are looking after Lewis. Now they actually are doing that. They're role-playing it. So I think that's really funny. Anyways, thank you for watching, and thank you to my channel members.